Hey, demigods and mortals. Ever since I was a kid, I've been obsessed with stories about magical swords. King Arthur, Perseus, Joan of Arc, they all had these amazing blades that could do the impossible. Who wouldn't want a weapon like that? These aren't just any old hunks of metal. We're talking about swords forged in the hearts of volcanoes, blessed by gods, or maybe even cursed by some nasty monster. They're symbols of power, destiny, and the never-ending battle between good and evil. In this essay, we're going to dive deep into the world of enchanted swords. We'll explore their origins in myths and legends, learn about their incredible powers, and see how they've shaped history and inspired countless stories. Get ready for an epic adventure, because where there's an enchanted sword, there's always a story worth telling. So, where did these stories about magic swords come from? Well, pretty much every ancient culture had its own myths about powerful weapons. The Greeks had their celestial bronze, forged by Hephaestus himself. The Egyptians had their khopesh curved blades that could channel the power of the gods. And don't even get me started on the Norse legends. Those guys were obsessed with enchanted weapons. These myths often explain the creation of the world or the rise of great heroes. Take Excalibur, for example. The story of King Arthur pulling the sword from the stone is all about destiny and leadership. It tells us that Arthur was chosen by the gods to rule. But these myths weren't just about explaining the past. They were also about inspiring people in the present. Imagine you're a young warrior about to go into battle. Wouldn't it give you courage to believe that your sword was forged by a god and imbued with magical power? Let's delve into the fascinating world of some of the most famous enchanted swords in history and mythology. These legendary blades have been the subject of countless tales and have inspired generations with their mystical powers and heroic stories. First up, we've got Excalibur, King Arthur's trusty blade. This sword is perhaps one of the most well-known in Western mythology. Excalibur was said to be able to cut through anything and make Arthur invincible in battle. It was a symbol of divine kingship and power, bestowed upon Arthur by the Lady of the Lake. Then there's Durandal, the sword of the French hero Roland. This blade is steeped in legend and is said to have been given to Roland by an angel. Legend has it that the sword was so strong it could cleave a mountain in two. Durandal was a symbol of unwavering strength and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Moving on to Asia, we've got the legendary Kusanagi no Tsurugi, one of the three sacred treasures of Japan. This sword is deeply embedded in Japanese culture and history. This sword is said to be able to control the wind and grant its wielder victory in battle. It represents the divine right of the Japanese emperors and is a symbol of their authority. And let's not forget about Zulfikar, the scimitar of the Islamic hero Ali. This sword holds a special place in Islamic tradition and is often depicted in art and literature. This sword was said to be able to split any material in half with a single blow. Zulfikar is a symbol of justice and righteousness, embodying the virtues of its wielder. These are just a few examples of the many enchanted swords that have captured our imaginations for centuries. Each of these blades carries with it a rich tapestry of stories and legends. Each sword has its own unique story and powers, but they all share one thing in common. They represent the hopes and dreams of the people who created them. These legendary weapons continue to inspire awe and wonder, reminding us of the timeless human quest for power, justice, and heroism. Okay, so we know these swords are supposed to be magical, but what does that really mean? What kind of powers did they actually have? And how did they come to possess such abilities? Well, that depends on the story and the culture from which the sword originates. Some swords could shoot fire, turning their wielders into fearsome opponents on the battlefield. Others had the miraculous ability to heal the wounded, making them invaluable in times of war and peace. And some could even control the weather, summoning storms or calming the seas. Take a look at the legendary sword of Beowulf, Hrunting. This blade was said to be immune to any spell or enchantment, making it the perfect weapon to fight Grendel's mother, a creature of dark magic. The sword's magical properties gave Beowulf an edge in his epic battles. Or how about the sword of Gryffindor, forged by goblins and able to imbue itself with the power of worthy wizards? This sword could absorb the abilities of those it deemed worthy, growing stronger with each new master. Where did these powers come from? Again, it varies widely across different myths and legends. Some swords were forged with magical metals imbued with properties that defied the natural world, like the Greek celestial bronze, which was said to be deadly to monsters and other supernatural beings. Others were blessed by gods, their divine favor granting the swords extraordinary powers. Some were even infused with the spirits of powerful creatures, giving them a life of their own. And some, like cursed blades, might have drawn their power from darker, more sinister sources. The point is, these swords were more than just weapons. They were symbols of power and magic. They were conduits of magic, capable of doing things that defied the laws of nature and reality. From altering the environment to defying natural elements, these swords were truly extraordinary. And that's what made them so cool. They were not just tools of war, but artifacts of legend and wonder. Now let's talk about how these enchanted swords were used in battle. In many stories, these swords were the deciding factor in major conflicts. They could turn the tide of battle, slay monsters, and even topple entire empires. Think about King Arthur and Excalibur. That sword helped him unite the Britons and defeat his enemies. Or Joan of Arc, who claimed to be guided by divine visions and carried a blessed sword into battle, rallying the French troops to victory. These swords weren't just about brute force. They were symbols of hope and inspiration. When all hope seemed lost, a hero with an enchanted sword could rally their troops and achieve the impossible. They were reminders that even in the darkest of times, courage and determination could prevail. More than metal, the cultural impact of enchanted swords. It's clear that enchanted swords are more than just cool weapons in stories. They've had a huge impact on our culture, influencing everything from literature and art to movies and video games. I mean, who hasn't pretended to wield a magic sword at some point? Think about how many books, movies, and games feature enchanted swords. From Lord of the Rings to The Witcher, these blades are everywhere. They represent courage, strength, and the struggle against evil. And it's not just fiction. Real-life swords have been revered throughout history. Think about the ceremonial swords used by kings and queens. These swords weren't just for show. They were symbols of power and authority. The point is, enchanted swords have captured our imaginations for centuries. They represent our deepest hopes and fears, our desire for power, and our belief in the power of good to triumph over evil. The line between myth and reality, historical swords and their stories. Now, I know what you're thinking. Did any of these magical swords actually exist? Were they just figments of imagination, or did they have a basis in reality? Well, that's where things get a little tricky. The line between myth and reality often blurs when it comes to these ancient weapons. See, while there are plenty of historical swords out there, none of them have been proven to shoot fire or control the weather, but their stories are no less fascinating. But that doesn't mean they weren't special. Each sword had its own unique story and significance. Take the Ulfbert swords, for example. These were not just ordinary Viking swords. These Viking Age blades were so well made that some people thought they were made with technology beyond their time. The craftsmanship was unparalleled. They were incredibly strong and flexible, which made them prized possessions for any warrior. Owning an Ulfbert sword was a mark of prestige and power. Then you've got swords like the Honjo Masamune, a Japanese katana so legendary it was said to be able to cut through anything. Its reputation was unmatched. While it couldn't slice through time or anything, its craftsmanship was so amazing that it became a national treasure. The Honjo Masamune symbolized the pinnacle of sword-making art. So, while we haven't found any fire-breathing, monster-slaying swords yet, real-life swords still have amazing stories to tell. They are a testament to human ingenuity and artistry. They remind us of the skill of ancient craftspeople and the powerful role these weapons played in history. Each sword is a piece of art, a piece of history, and a piece of the human story. The enduring appeal, why we're still drawn to enchanted swords. So why are we still so fascinated by enchanted swords after all these years? I think it's because they represent something deep within us. They symbolize the power we all wish we had. The power to overcome any obstacle, defeat any enemy, and make the world a better place. Plus, they're just plain cool. Who wouldn't want a sword that can shoot lightning bolts or turn invisible? These weapons tap into our sense of wonder and adventure, reminding us that anything is possible. And let's not forget the stories. Enchanted swords are often at the heart of epic tales of good versus evil, love and loss, and the struggle for freedom. They remind us that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope. As long as we keep telling these stories, the legend of the enchanted sword will live on. Conclusion: the legacy of the blade. From the myths of ancient Greece to the video games of today, enchanted swords have captured our imaginations for centuries. They're more than just weapons, they're symbols of power, destiny, and the never-ending battle between good and evil. While we may never know for sure if these magical blades truly existed, their legacy lives on in the stories we tell and the values they represent. They remind us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, courage, determination, and a little bit of magic can make all the difference. So the next time you see a sword, whether it's in a museum or on the big screen, take a moment to appreciate its history and the power it holds. You never know, it just might inspire you to go on your own epic adventure.